All right, everybody, welcome back to another TechHub.Training solution video. My name is Caden, and I'm excited to walk you through today's solution to the Practice CTE challenge using food imports data. That sounds like a mouthful, but we're going to break this down. It'll be super simple, I promise, and you're going to love it. The first thing I wanted to start with was a little disclaimer about kind of the way we did this challenge. Now, a lot of our SQL challenges use Microsoft Access as the tool to create the database and then run the SQL queries against it. Microsoft Access, however, does not support CTE functions. We had to get a little creative here, and I found this website, SQLite Online, and this is going to be our tool in our solution video. If the tool that you use was different, that's totally fine. Um, but you'll see this particular layout for our video solution. So with that disclaimer in mind, let's go ahead and dive into this. The first thing that we did was set up our table that we're going to query against. So I provided you with the file, this food imports CTE praxis.txt file, or whatever we end up calling it online. And you'll see here that it's just a ton of rows of data. And actually what we're going to do is as soon as we get into this website, you're just going to open this file, copy everything in here, Control A, and you're going to paste it all in here and run this code. If it runs correctly, you should see food imports pop up on the side here, and you shouldn't see any errors or warnings. If you do see some errors or warnings, you might want to delete this table by right-clicking, clicking on delete, and then refreshing the page and repasting that data back in. Now, once you have that, you're ready to go ahead and start querying it. CTEs, we'll start there. So CTEs are common table expressions, as we read about in the challenge. And basically what that means is you can create kind of this temporary table within your query that you can then reference and query against to get an outcome, right? So the way you start with that is with this with statement. So we're going to say with and then define this statement as a yearly import. And we'll define this below as the year number, the sum of the value, and the total imports. So if we're imagining what this means in our head, you have now a column of year number, and the values populated are the sum values of all these total imports from our original data, where the unit of measure is equal to $1 million, right? Or millions of dollars, you could say. The reason why this where statement is important is because this table that we created has rows that aren't just related to dollars, they're also related to like weights and other food import information. So since we're going just for the dollar amounts, we're going to qualify that with a where statement. And then of course, we'll group everything by the year number. So what we end up with in total is every year for the last little bit, I think since 1999, and for every year, a sum total of the food imports in the millions of dollars. Awesome. So now we're going to move on to our select statement after this CTE, and we're going to reference this CTE within this statement, right? So you have A and then the year number, and then of course this is from yearly imports A. Now you might be wondering what this A qualifier is in front and over here. Basically, with the CTEs, we're going to make an A version and a B version. And the reason why we do that is because we're going to match up the years offset from one another. And I'll walk you through that in just a second, but that will help us to create a growth rate year over year. So we're selecting the year number, the total imports, and then we have this equation to calculate a growth rate, which is the total imports minus of this year minus the total imports of the previous year over the total imports of the previous year, and then of course times 100 because it's a percentage. And that's as a growth rate. So that's going to populate this column. And then from the yearly imports A, and we're left joining that on yearly imports B. We're left joining it because if we inner join, that's going to exclude one of our columns. I suppose you can inner join if you want to, since 1999 won't have a growth rate since that's our first year. So you're joining those on year number and year number, but here on this B table, you've got year number plus one. Now, essentially what that means is that the current year number, or year number A, is going to match up with year number B plus one, or the future year. That means when we reference year number B, as we do up here, or total imports B, that's going to be the previous year, since A represents the current year. So what that does, again, is that creates a total imports from this year minus the total imports from the previous year over the total imports of the previous year as a growth rate. And then we're going to order everything by our growth rate, of course, to get our total imports. And the highest growth rate of those total imports we can see is year 2011. Next highest is 2021, and the next highest after that is 2022. Well, we've reached the end of our solution here. I hope you've enjoyed this problem. CTEs are a super powerful thing that you can use within SQL or SQL to create these mini tables and do row over row calculations, which I think is super cool. Don't forget to post your code. Your code might look a little bit different than mine. There are multiple ways to use CTE functions to get to the same answer. But don't forget to, of course, post your code, your version of this, and your your highest growth rate year as part of your solutions in the comments section. Again, I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.